The mists of Barovia. The autumn sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets of Daggerford. As night fell, a chill wind whispered through the town, carrying with it the promise of adventure and danger. 5 unlikely companions found themselves gathered in the warmth of Lady Morwen's dining hall. The crackling fire and scent of spiced wine did little to ease the tension that hung in the air. Lady Morwen, her face etched with worry, leaned forward and spoke in hushed tones.
"My friends,"
she began, her eyes darting to each of them in turn.
"I fear our town faces a new threat. A band of travellers has set up camp outside our walls. At first they seemed harmless, but now—"
She trailed off, her grip tightening on her goblet. Ignar Brasson, a battle-hardened warrior, raised an eyebrow.
"How long have they been here, my lady?"
"A few weeks,"
Morwen replied.
"But their behaviour has grown concerning. They've been harassing townspeople, demanding coins and wine. There's talk of hexes and curses."
The wizard of the group, his eyes glinting with curiosity, leaned forward.
"Have you noticed anything unusual about them? Anything that might help us understand their motives?"
Lady Morwen shook her head.
"They're an enigma. Travellers in wagons, but no one knows their origin. They seem not of this land."
Ignar, ever the pragmatist, fixed Lady Morwen with a steady gaze.
"I know we're friends, but what's this worth to you?"
Lady Morwen's expression hardened with resolve.
50 gold pieces if they're gone by tomorrow. They're camped about 10 minutes from the gate."
The promise of gold hung in the air, a tangible reminder of the task at hand. Yet, as the companions would soon discover, there are some threats that no amount of gold can truly compensate for. As the night deepened, the companions set out towards the town gates. The torchlight flickered ominously, casting long shadows across their path. As they approached, they found 2 sentries standing guard, their expressions unusually vacant. Ignar stepped forward, his voice gruff with authority.
"Open the gate. Lady Morwen has commanded us to deal with the camp."
The guards exchanged a glance, a mischievous glint in their eyes. One of them, a stout man with a bushy beard, stepped forward.
"Hold on, good fellas. If you want the gates open, you'll have to best us in a simple game."
The companions exchanged puzzled looks. This was certainly not standard procedure for Daggerford's guards. The guard continued, a sly grin spreading across his face.
"The game is what colour am I thinking of?"
For a moment, silence reigned. Then the wizard of the group stepped forward, his eyes narrowing in concentration. With a confidence that belied the absurdity of the situation, he declared,
"You are thinking of the color red."
As the heavy iron gates creaked open, the companions couldn't help but share bemused glances. It seemed that even in the face of grave danger, the whims of fate, or perhaps the influence of some unseen magic, could still provide moments of unexpected levity. With the gates now open, they stepped out into the night, the weight of their task settling upon their shoulders once more. The promise of Lady Morwen's gold spurred them on, but little did they know that their simple mission was about to take a turn into realms of darkness beyond their wildest imaginings. The campfire of the mysterious travellers flickered in the distance, a beacon in the gathering gloom. As they approached, they found a scene of unexpected merriment. Men and women danced around the fire, their laughter carried on the wind. Ornate wagons stood nearby, horses adorned with bangles and tassels grazing peacefully. A well-dressed man with a beard stepped forward, his arms spread wide in welcome.
"Come join us by the fire. We have wine and stories to tell."
Ignar, ever direct, cut to the chase.
"We've heard rumors of threats made against the townsfolk. When can we tell them you'll be moving on?"
The man, introducing himself as Stanimir, offered Ignar a flask. When the warrior declined, Stanimir's eyes twinkled with respect.
"We have no wish to make enemies, but I have a story to tell, and then we will leave."
Stanimir took a deep draught from his flask, then spat the wine into the fire. The flames turned from orange to green, and as they danced and swayed, a dark shape appeared in the bonfire's core.
"We come from an ancient land, whose name is long forgotten. It was the land of kings, but our enemies forced us from our homes."
Stanimir began, his voice taking on a lyrical quality. In the fire, the companions saw the shape of a man being knocked from a horse, a spear piercing his side.
"One night a wounded soldier staggered into our camp and collapsed. We nursed him back to health, tending his terrible injury and quenching his thirst. When he recovered, we asked who he was, but he wouldn't say. He only spoke of his desire to return home, but we were deep in the land of his enemies.
The fire flickered, showing shadowy figures tending to a prone form. In the bonfire, they saw a dark figure standing with a sword drawn, fighting a host of shadowy shapes.
We took him as one of our own and followed him back to his homeland. His enemies hunted him relentlessly. It was then he revealed he was a prince. We didn't give him up, even when the assassins came. This man of royal blood fought to protect us as we protected him. We brought him safely to his home, and he thanked us, saying, "I owe you my life. Stay as long as you wish. Leave when you choose. You will always be safe here. But a curse has fallen on our noble prince, turning him into a tyrant. We alone have the power to leave his domain. We've traveled far and wide to find heroes such as yourselves to end the Red Lord's curse and put his troubled soul to rest."
The figure in the dancing fire vanquished its final foe, and the illusion disappeared in a cloud of smoking embers. Stanimir's face became a somber mask as he delivered the final part of his tale. Stanimir's eyes met each of the companions in turn.
"Our leader, Madame Eva, knows all. Will you return with us to Barovia and speak with her?"
The companions exchanged glances, each weighing the gravity of the situation. This was no simple matter of chasing off troublesome travelers. This was a call to adventure, to right an ancient wrong. As dawn broke, the group found themselves making a decision that would change their lives forever. They would join Stanimir and his people on their quest to break the curse and free their prince. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As they prepared to depart, a strange mist began to creep through the camp. It thickened rapidly, obscuring their vision and clouding their minds. When it finally cleared, they found themselves in a land that was at once familiar and utterly alien. Gone were the friendly faces of Stanimir and his people. In their place stood dark, brooding forests and muddy roads that seemed to lead nowhere. The air itself felt heavy with malevolence. As they cautiously made their way down the muddy road, the mist parting reluctantly before them, the companions felt a growing sense of unease. The trees loomed on either side, their branches like gnarled fingers reaching out to snatch unwary travellers. Suddenly, the crack of twigs and the sound of multiple feet alerted them to a presence. Through the fog, they could make out the silhouettes of 5 hooded figures, bows drawn and aimed in their direction. Before anyone could react, arrows whistled through the air. One flew past Barnacle, another narrowly missed Smoking Joe, and a third grazed Ignar's armour. 2 found their mark, however, one striking Celine in the side and another hitting Wizard. Celine, gritting her teeth against the pain, limped behind her companions for cover. Barnacle, his usual jovial demeanour replaced by fierce determination, attempted to intimidate the hooded figures. His efforts were met with mocking laughter as the assailants continued their assault. Wizard, despite his injury, summoned his arcane powers. With a gesture and a word, he cast Acid Splash, aiming for 2 of the hooded figures. One managed to dive out of the way, but the other was caught in the caustic spray, crying out in pain as the acid ate through cloth and flesh. Ignar, never one to back down from a fight, charged forward, his twin swords glinting in the dim light. With a mighty swing, he struck one of the attackers, but his follow-up attack went wide as the nimble forehand dodged. Smoking Joe, his fingers dancing across his lute strings, attempted to mock the hooded figures with a biting song. To his surprise, the assailants merely smiled at his efforts, seemingly unaffected by his magical mockery. The battle raged on, with arrows flying and swords clashing. Just when it seemed the tide was turning in their favour, Celine stepped forward, her tiefling features clearly visible in the misty gloom. The effect was immediate and unexpected. The hooded figures, upon seeing her demonic ancestry, were struck with terror. Without another word, they turned and fled into the mist, leaving the companions breathless and confused. As the adrenaline of the fight began to fade, the true strangeness of their situation began to sink in. They were in an unknown land, attacked by unknown foes, for reasons they couldn't fathom, and this was only the beginning of their trials. As they pressed on through the misty forest, the trees thinned out slightly, revealing a clearing to their right. Celine was the first to notice, her keen eyes picking out an unnatural shape through the fog.
"Look,"
she said, her voice barely above a whisper.
"What's that?"
The group approached cautiously, the mist parting to reveal a grim sight that would haunt their dreams for nights to come. A crude wooden stockade stood in the clearing, and hanging from it was the body of a young girl, no more than 12 or 13 years old. Her once fine dress was now tattered and stained with mud and blood. Claw marks raked across her small form, and it was clear that scavengers had been at the body. A beam of sunlight, a rarity in this gloomy land, broke through the thick clouds above, illuminating the macabre scene. In the girl's lifeless hand, they could see a small, delicate flower, surprisingly fresh despite the decay around it. Smoking Joe, his curiosity overcoming his better judgment, approached the stockade. Without hesitation, he began to search the body, his fingers deftly exploring pockets and folds in the girl's clothing. Wizard, not to be outdone, joined in the macabre treasure hunt. Celine looked on with horror and disgust.
"What are you doing?"
she hissed.
"Have you no respect for the dead?"
Igna stepped forward, his face set in a grim mask.
Enough.
He growled, pushing Smoking Joe and Wizard aside.
We're taking her down and burying her. It's not right to leave her like this.
Barnacle nodded in agreement, and even Celine, despite her revulsion at the looting, moved to help. Together, they carefully lowered the girl's body from the stockade. As Ignar used his sword to dig a shallow grave, Barnacle gathered stones to mark the site, and Celine collected wildflowers to place on the grave. As they lowered the girl's body into the grave, a chill wind swept through the clearing. For a moment, just at the edge of perception, they saw the ghostly form of the girl rise from her body. Her ethereal face was a mask of sorrow and anger. She turned to them, her gaze sweeping across the group before settling on Wizard. With an accusing finger, she pointed directly at the mage, her empty eyes seeming to bore into his very soul. Wizard stumbled back, nearly dropping the trinkets he'd pocketed. The ghost's message was clear. It did not approve of the desecration of its earthly remains. As quickly as it appeared, the apparition vanished, leaving behind a bone-chilling cold and a sense of unspoken judgment, but not before pointing an accusing finger at the distant, looming silhouette of a castle barely visible through the mist. Shaken by what they'd witnessed, the companions finished the burial in silence. As they stood over the fresh grave, each lost in their own thoughts, they knew that their path forward was clear. Whatever evil lurked in this land, whatever dark force had led to this child's cruel fate, they would face it. But the weight of their actions, the desecration of the innocent, would haunt them for days to come. Continuing down the road, still shaken from the encounter with the girl's ghost, Celine suddenly stopped short.
"Do you smell that?"
she asked, her nose wrinkling in disgust. The foul stench of decay reached them, and Smoking Joe, ever curious, stepped off the road to investigate. About 15 feet from the path, partially obscured by underbrush, lay a sight that would haunt their dreams for nights to come. The body of a young man, a commoner by his dress, lay crumpled on the forest floor. His clothes were torn and stained with mud and blood, claw marks raking across his form. It was clear that scavengers had been at the body, which appeared to have lain in the woods for several days. Wizard approached cautiously, his keen eyes taking in every detail. In the man's hand, he noticed a crumpled envelope. Carefully, he pried it from the stiffened fingers and handed it to Barnacle. Barnacle unfolded the letter and began to read aloud.
"I, the Burgomaster of Barovia, send you honor with despair. My adopted daughter, the fair Irina Koliana, has been these past nights bitten by a vampire. For over 400 years, this creature has drained the lifeblood of my people. Now, my dear Irina languishes and dies from an unholy wound caused by this vile beast. He has become too powerful to conquer, so I say to you, give us up for dead and encircle this land with the symbols of good. Let holy men call upon their power that the devil may be contained within the walls of weeping Barovia. Leave our sorrows to our graves and save the world from this evil fate of ours. There is much wealth hidden in this community. Return for your reward after we are all departed for a better life. Kolyan Indirovich, Burgomaster.
As Barnacle finished reading, a heavy silence fell over the group. They exchanged grim looks, the weight of the burgomaster's words settling upon them like a physical burden. It seemed their fate was now entwined with that of this cursed land and its people. They knew they had to press on to find a way to break the dark hold over Barovia. Ignar knelt down beside the body, his eyes tracing the vicious claw marks that had torn through cloth and flesh.
Another victim of this cursed place,
he murmured.
How many more must suffer before this evil is ended?
Celine placed a gentle hand on his shoulder.
We will find a way,
she said, her voice firm despite the tremble in her fingers.
We must, for the sake of all those who have been lost, and all those who may yet be saved.
Smoking Joe, without a word, began to drag the corpse behind him as they continued down the road. The others exchanged puzzled and slightly disturbed looks, but no one questioned him outright. In this strange land, they were learning to expect the unexpected. For 15 tense minutes they walked, the howls of the wolves growing louder and closer with each passing moment. The mist swirled around them, obscuring their vision and muffling their footsteps. Each rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made them jump, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. Then, out of the fog, 5 snarling wolves emerged, their eyes glinting with hunger and malice. They stalked forward, fangs bared, sizing up the companions as potential prey. Smoking Joe, seeing the wolves, hurled the corpse at them, hoping to buy some time. But to his dismay, the beasts barely spared a glance at the rotting flesh. Their attention was fixed solely on the living, breathing targets before them. The wolves lunged forward, snapping and snarling. The companions met them head-on, weapons flashing in the dim light. Ignar's twin swords cut a deadly arc, while Barnacle's rapier darted in and out, seeking vulnerable flesh. Wizard's arcane bolts sizzled through the air, singing fur and flesh where they struck. Celine, her sword in hand, found herself face to face with a particularly vicious beast. Its eyes gleamed with a malevolent intelligence as it circled her, looking for an opening. She feinted to the left, then struck right, her blade cutting a deep gash along the wolf's flank. The creature snarled in pain and rage, its jaws snapping inches from her face. Barnacle, meanwhile, had his hands full with 2 wolves that had singled him out. He ducked and weaved, his rapier a blur of steel as he fended off their attacks. Seizing a moment of opportunity, he sheathed his blade and extended his hands towards the mist swirling overhead. His fingers wove intricate patterns in the air as he chanted arcane words of power. The mist began to coalesce, droplets merging and solidifying into a large, jagged block of ice. With a final word, Barnacle sent the ice hurtling towards one of the wolves. The beast looked up just in time to see death bearing down upon it. The ice struck with a sickening crunch, crushing the wolf beneath its weight. Slowly, painfully, the companions finished off the last of the wolves. As the final beast fell, its lifeblood staining the muddy ground, they stood panting and bloodied, looking at each other with a new understanding of the horrors this land held. Ignar walked over to the wolf crushed by Barnacle's ice spell. The beast lay in a slowly expanding pool of blood, shards of ice still embedded in its shattered body.
Nice work,
Ignar said, giving Barnacle a nod of respect. Barnacle, his usual grin back in place, shrugged.
Just trying to keep things cool.
Despite the grim situation, the group couldn't help but chuckle at Barnacle's quip. It was a small moment of levity in a land that seemed determined to crush their spirits. With the wolf encounter behind them, The group pressed on, the road winding through the misty forest. The air grew colder as they walked, the chill seeping through their cloaks and armor. It was as if the very land was trying to leach the warmth from their bodies. After what felt like hours, but could have been mere minutes in this timeless place, they saw lights flickering in the distance. As they drew closer, the shapes of buildings began to emerge from the fog, huddled together as if seeking comfort in closeness. They had reached the village. As they turned a corner, a sign swinging in the breeze caught their eye. "Blood of the Vine Tavern," it read, the letters faded and peeling. A single shaft of light cut through the gloom, spilling from the tavern's gaping doorway like a beacon of hope in this desolate place. Inside they found a somber gathering. The innkeeper stood behind the bar, his face a mask of weary resignation. 3 haggard-looking villagers sat nursing their drinks, their eyes hollow and haunted. In the corner, a lone figure sat, his features obscured by a heavy cloak. The companions approached the bar.
We need rooms for the night,
Ignar said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The innkeeper nodded, his expression unchanging.
2 gold pieces per room, pay in advance.
Smoking Joe tossed the coins onto the bar, and the innkeeper slid a set of keys across the stained wood.
Upstairs, end of the hall, don't expect much.
As the group turned to head upstairs, Barnacle paused. His eyes had fallen on the cloaked figure in the corner. There was something about the man's posture, the way he held himself, that spoke of more than just another broken villager.
Well, it looks like you have a story to tell,
Barnacle said, sliding into the chair opposite the stranger. The man looked up, his face still shadowed by his hood.
More than you know,
he said, his voice low and grave.
My name is Mark Kosanovich, son of the burgomaster.
Ismark took a deep draught from his wine, his eyes distant as if seeing into another time. When he spoke, his voice was low and grave.
Barovia has been under the curse of Strahd von Zarovich for centuries. He is an ancient vampire, a being of immense power and cruelty. From his fortress, Castle Ravenloft, he rules over this land like a tyrant, his minions spreading terror and death.
He paused, his grip tightening on his cup.
My father, Kolyan Indirovich, was the burgomaster of this village. He tried to protect the people, to keep some semblance of order and normalcy. But Strahd's reach is long, and his hunger knows no bounds.
Ismark's gaze drifted to the flickering candles on the table, their light reflecting in his haunted eyes.
A week ago, my father was found dead in his study. His throat had been torn out, his body drained of blood. The work of Strahd's spawn, no doubt.
He looked back at the group, his expression hardening.
But that's not the worst of it. My adopted sister, Irina, she's been bitten. Strahd has marked her, chosen her to be his next bride. She's fighting the curse, but I don't know how long she can resist.
Ismark leaned forward, his voice urgent.
I've heard tales of a holy place, the Abbey of St. Markovia in Kresk. They say it's protected by powerful wards, that even Strahd's power cannot touch it. If I can get Irina there, she might have a chance.
He spread his hands, a gesture of supplication.
But I can't do it alone. The road to Kresk is long and perilous, and Strahd's minions are everywhere. I need help, brave souls who are willing to stand against the darkness.
Ismark's eyes met each of the companions in turn, a flicker of desperate hope in their depths.
I know I'm asking a lot. This is not your fight, not your curse. But I'm begging you, help me save my sister. Help me strike a blow against Strahd, to show that there are still those who resist his evil.
He sat back, his shoulders slumping as if a great weight pressed upon them.
In return, I offer you all that I have. My knowledge of this land, my sword at your side, and whatever wealth my family still possesses. It's not much, but it's all I have to give.
As Ismark fell silent, his plea hanging in the air. In the flickering candlelight, the companions could see the toll that the horrors of Barovia had taken on him. The lines of grief and worry etched into his face, the shadows of sleepless nights haunting his eyes. He was a man driven to the edge of despair, clinging to one last fragile hope. The hope that somewhere, even in this cursed land, there were still heroes to be found. The companions exchanged glances, the weight of Ismark's words settling heavily upon them. They had come to Barovia seeking adventure, a chance to right wrongs and prove their mettle. But this was more than they had bargained for. And yet how could they turn away? In the face of such grief, such desperation, could they truly walk away and leave this man and his sister to their fate? It was Ignar who broke the silence, his voice gruff but resolute.
We'll help you,
he said, meeting Ismark's gaze.
Let's see your sister to safety, and we'll stand with you against Strahd.
The others nodded, their expressions grim but determined. They had found their purpose in Barovia, a quest that would test their courage and their resolve to the utmost. Ismark's eyes glistened with unshed tears, gratitude and relief warring on his face.
Thank you,
he whispered.
Thank you. With your help, perhaps there is still hope for Barovia. And for Irina.
Their quest had begun, and they could only pray that they would be equal to the challenges ahead. For in this land of eternal night, hope was the most precious commodity of all.